and sunny and nice Paris. And my first guest of the conference,
Whoa.
yeah,
First guest.
is Gael. Great to meet you, Gael Renoux.
Yes.
There you go, great Renoux. Gael, nice to meet you.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you
you
very
too.
much for coming. And I asked you what we're going to talk about, and you mentioned a very, very interesting concept. Code design as communication medium.
Yeah. See,
So tell me a little bit about it.
the idea is, a lot of the time, and it's not helped by all the tools we have to check that. Hey, is your class too big? Is your method too big? We treat them as kind of a totem or something sacred that should be accomplished. But behind it, the basic idea is how you communicate what you're doing with other developers, right? So how can they get into the code easily? How can they understand what it's doing? How can they modify it easily? It's just a way to, hey, future developer, here's how it works. Let me help you understand how it works, right? And I think it's not. I don't find that it's a way people often think about how to design code. But I think that's what makes the difference between a code that's easy to understand and code that isn't. Like, let me give you an example. Like, imagine you have a very, very, very big class with a huge method, and the common knowledge is okay, cut it down, right? So you cut your big method in a few little ones, and now you have like a dozen of little methods, and hey, it's not actually easier to understand. It's kind of even worse because now you have to move around a lot to understand what's happening. And because at no point you stop thinking, okay, how can I communicate what that piece of code do? Like, and of course there's the naming of the method, right? You need to name the method correctly, etc. But that's not the only thing, because sometimes I've seen developers put too much things inside the small method, and no, this little part, you can keep it in the main one because it makes the little method more an abstraction, something that you can abstract away and think of it as a black box. And that is what makes the code easier to understand.
So we have all those concepts of solid, right, and dry, and all those very important concepts that are, in theory, designed to do exactly that.
Yes.
Right? So all the solid principles are about how do you structure your code so it will do only one thing, so it will be descriptive, so you won't repeat yourself, and all this kind of stuff. This is what you are talking about.
Yeah, pretty much. And the idea is you should not forget why those concepts exist, right? We don't do solid because it's fun. We don't do dry because it is fun, but that's not the main reason, right? We do it also because, again, it's communication. The idea behind it is how do you communicate what you're doing? How do you communicate intent in your code? And for me, the part that you should design abstractions. That's the main idea when you do this kind of stuff, right? It's not just putting methods away in other classes and stuff. It's no. You should. What abstraction here are you building? How are you going to communicate this class? You don't need to know what's inside. You just need to know, hey, as a black box, here's what it represents.
Yep. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And in Build Proportion Lab, we're all about developer productivity, and I think that the right design, right code design, might be very, very significant. Might give very, very significant boost to developer productivity as well.
Yeah, I think that because there's always you always expect someone when they arrive on a new project to take some time to learn how it works, right? But it's not just when you arrive on the project. It's on big projects. Honestly, you asked me to come back to a piece of code I worked on like 3 months ago, and I'm okay. I know that code, right? I wrote it, but what does it do exactly? What does it do exactly? Because it's been months. I've worked on other pieces of code since, and this whole learning process, you keep doing it over and over and over again.
Yes, that's true. But it's usually suggested that we fix it through comments.
Yeah, so I'm not saying that you should not comment, actually. But again, I find that comments, it's the same idea, right? Okay, the same developers who tend to extract code in methods without really thinking about the abstraction, they're also the same that when they put a comment explaining, hey, here's what the method is doing. Yeah, I don't care. What I want is what's the purpose of the method? Can you give me in a simple phrase, in a simple sentence, hey, that's what this class is. That's what its method is. I want a black box, because if I have to dig into the method, if I have to read the whole comment to understand, okay, that's what it's doing, so the end result is this and that, yeah, then why is it in another method, right? I didn't win anything by extracting it. And so, yeah, this comment is the same thing. It should, the first sentence of every comment, of every class comment and stuff, should always be, hey, as a black box, here's what this is doing, right? I don't want to dig into that, because if I have to, again, why is it in a separate method?
Yep. So let me try and summarize like two main pieces of advice from this interview. The first would be abstract as much as possible.
Yeah.
So the intent will be very
Yeah,
clear.
exactly, with meaningful abstractions.
Right. And the second is think about who is going to try and understand what you did by reading
Exactly.
the code and reading the comments, and what is most important
Yes.
for them when they're looking at your code or at your comment.
Yeah, and you have really to think about the two ways they can come into your code, right? Are they coming in because they're going to use it, and then they need to know what it does? Or are they coming in to modify the inside? And then, yeah, that's where you put all the comments. So, okay, here's how if the algorithm is a bit complicated, okay, here's how it works, here's what I'm doing, that's fine. But you also have to think about the developer as a user of your code.
And obviously users that's a much more common use case
Yeah,
than
exactly.
someone who's going to modify the internals and the behavior. So you need to prioritize people who is going to look at your code and see how they can use it, and not those who are going to understand the details, the tiny bit of details of how it works.
And it's inevitable, because when you want to modify a piece of code, right, there's one piece of code you want to modify, but there's a bunch of them you're going to use. There are always to be more, for each piece of code, there are always going to be more users than modifiers.
Yep, and that makes perfect sense. Gael, thank you very much. It was very, very profound and useful. And you all stay tuned for more Build Proportion Lab interviews at DevOps Friends. We just got started. We have 3 days packed with great interviews, all of them coming to you live on all the Gradle channels, Gradle Twitter, Gradle LinkedIn, I think even Gradle Facebook for whoever is watching, maybe. But obviously, stay tuned. There is tons of great comment coming. Thank you, and see you soon.
And thank you for the opportunity.